I want you to move from overwhelmed by information to confident in what really matters. I want to help you move from being unsure towards direction and purpose in your healthcare. I want to introduce you to health experts. I want to let you in on tough conversations on women's health. I want to give you a place where you can lean in and learn how to take care of yourself. Let's transform your health. Let's get clear on your goals. This is Women's Health Unplugged. I'm your host, Dr. Jordan Robertson, naturopathic doctor. Welcome to another episode of Women's Health Unplugged. I'm Dr. Jordan Robertson. I'm a naturopathic doctor and the host of this show. Today's a solo episode for me, and I want to talk about a concept related to hormonal health that women often approach me for support with. I want to talk about hormones and cravings and the impact that hormones have on our food choices and our decisions to eat, and then how that sort of consequently will impact a woman's ability to manage or maintain her weight. So food cravings are interesting. I've looked into the research on food cravings in multiple ways. I've looked at the impact that hormones have on food cravings. And it's interesting because our decisions to eat are driven by almost like two sides of our brain. It's driven by literally the biological drive to eat, right? So we need to eat just the same way that we need to drink water. We get hungry enough. There is this like sort of biological drive to push us to eat things that are edible. And that's sort of like the primary driver of how we make decisions around food. But then, as we know, appetite and food choice there's other parts, right, of our food making decisions or our meal making decisions that are not just driven by sort of the bare essentials of, do I need to eat? Do I not need to eat? And this is really complicated. We've looked at it in lots of areas of research. We've looked at it from like hormonal health and looking at, the signals that we get from our intestinal tract. Like, is it telling our brain that we're full? But then we've got the like side of ourselves that are looking at the more emotional and psychological impact that those parts of our brain have on food selection and whether or not we decide to eat. And we think that the impact that hormones have on the decision to eat is actually more in that side of ourselves versus it being this biological drive to eat. So the cravings that we're experiencing during PMS, and we're going to talk about why we think that happens, or some things that maybe will support that and perhaps not happening for you, that it is much more related to like the psychological decision to eat, the emotional decision to eat. And even there is a cultural component to food cravings related to PMS. So there are cultures out there that don't have the memes floating around that you eat chocolate during PMS, right? There is a, North American or westernized version of PMS that includes cravings as part of the, sort of the picture that we would expect women to have. And yet we see that in the research too, right? So if we research women on PMS with PMS, they definitely have more cravings, but there is a cultural almost acceptance of this being part of the symptom complex related to PMS. We do not see it across all cultures, which I think is interesting because it means that it's being driven by something other than just like this sheer biological process that's happening. Even though when you ask women, like, hey, tell me about your cravings, women feel like it is this, switch that gets flipped and something that they're maybe not totally in control of. And I will say maybe in those minutes or those windows, perhaps we are not terribly in control. But interestingly, we might be setting ourselves up with previous decisions, right? So maybe that 5-minute window where we black out and eat a bag of salt and vinegar chips isn't the problem. It may be the previous 9 hours or even previous few days where we've set ourselves up to have these cravings. And in that 5-minute window where we're eating the chips, then it really does feel like this biological drive, to eat food. So what we know about the influence of sex hormones on appetite is that it's much more intertwined to mood, emotional state, and stress than it is tied to other parts of our appetite drive or decision to eat. And we see that both with women who are in PMS, and we also see it in women transitioning through perimenopause and into menopause, is that appetite changes are mostly driven how women feel, not that their hormones are having a particular, their hormones are not pushing on a button that says, now you have a craving. It's that the way that women feel actually makes them more inclined to using food as a reward, right? That we're rewarding ourselves emotionally with food, especially tasty food, rather than the hormones like literally pushing a button that says, okay, Jordan, go have a snack. Okay. There is a relationship between energy intake and the menstrual cycle. And so this is the other piece that's kind of interesting. We do see an ebb and flow in a woman's monthly caloric intake. We see a difference in a woman's meal size depending on where she is in her menstrual cycle. And that, technically, if women are having this beautiful ebb and flow between her follicular phase and her luteal phase, that we should see sort of a net zero as far as impact on weight. But technically, there are changes to food intake throughout the menstrual cycle. So just to review, that follicular phase is the first half of your menstrual cycle. So that's before ovulation. In general, hormone levels are relatively low during that time, and they're supposed to be low. And women who suffer with PMS may feel their best during that period of time. So women may feel that, after about day 3 of their period, that their hormone levels have started to rise again into the next cycle. And that's where women tend to feel their absolute best. And in that follicular phase, we are generally more resilient to stressors and can thrive or continue to thrive with less, right? So we can thrive with less food, we can thrive with less sleep, we can take on more. That's our most sort of badass version of ourselves, is during that phase of the menstrual cycle. And we do see when we watch women throughout their cycle that, the food intake does decrease during that time. So, in the research that's been done on it, we think it's about 200 to 300 calories per day lower than we see women increase their food by in that luteal phase. So there is a reduction in caloric intake naturally during that time. Interestingly, women also move around more during that time. So during that follicular phase, women eat a little bit less, they feel better, and they move around more. Okay. And we actually reduce the meal size. It doesn't have to do as much with meal frequency. So as you're listening to this, you may resonate with parts of the conversation and not resonate with the others. I'm just showing you what we see in the research. So when we globally look at, a few hundred women, what is on average women experience? You may increase your number of meals, but the average woman actually doesn't increase the number of meals. It's the size of her meals that changes through her cycle. So in that follicular phase, we have a decrease in calories consumed, and it's meal size that goes down, not meal frequency. There's generally a reduction of intake of sweet foods. So whether that's the women don't crave it, if it's that they feel better during that time, we're not sure completely. If we look at other areas of research that look at the impact of hormones on eating behavior, estrogen actually does decrease emotional binge eating. And estrogen is the dominant hormone that's related during that follicular phase. So it is really the only hormone that is present of the two, estrogen and progesterone. And progestins and progesterone seem to oppose that impact on appetite and eating. So painting the picture here, we've got our follicular phase woman. She is happy. She is thriving. She feels confident. She moves around more, and she eats smaller portions. And then at ovulation, estrogen levels rise, of course, and so do progesterone levels. So progesterone is the hormone that is not dominant during the second half of the cycle, but it is present during the second half of the cycle. And that shift or change into that ovulatory state, women feel differently. And we've talked about PMS in lots of other episodes, but generally there is a symptom picture that goes along with PMS that maybe includes some physical symptoms such as bloating or perhaps headaches or fluid retention, breast tenderness. Those are pretty typical physical symptoms. And then there's the emotional symptoms. When I ask women if they have PMS, they just think about the emotions. They don't think about the physical. But there's this sort of complex of symptoms that some women may feel, and the majority of women have PMS at some point in time during their life. And those emotional symptoms start to change eating behavior in part. So women don't feel as well. And also just in that luteal phase, energy is lower. Women's food intake goes up by approximately 300 calories or so per day. Her movement is less. So she spontaneously walked all over the place in her follicular phase. And then in her luteal phase, she moves less than normal. And she has this impact of her hormones on her mood, which starts to exert this influence on those secondary drivers around appetite. So again, like I said, it's not the hormones that are just pushing a button saying, now you eat. It's that the hormones influence the way the woman feels, and then that has an impact on her food intake. And this is likely what is happening when we see women move into that perimenopausal or menopausal transition. Again, the influence that hormones have on appetite starts to go away. So what we see with anovulatory cycles, so cycles where there is no ovulation, and that may happen in young women, like women with polycystic ovarian syndrome. And that may happen in women over 40 as they start to transition towards perimenopause, that you'll get what we call an anovulatory cycle. And that beautiful, follicular phase where we move around a lot and eat less. And then luteal phase where we eat a little more, move a little less, but again, net zero. We don't get that fluctuation in an anovulatory cycle. And actually, women eat more and move less the entire month. We don't get that nice ebb and flow. The eating does not decrease during an anovulatory cycle, which is really interesting. And we see also as women transition into perimenopause and menopause, the influence that hormones start to have on the way the woman feels is probably the most impactful on her appetite regulation and cravings, because even one night of sleep restriction will influence how a patient eats the following day. And when we look at some of the chief concerns of women transitioning into menopause, with sleep disturbance being one of the top 3 concerns, hot flashes, which then influence sleep disturbance, being maybe number 2, and then just straight up depression being the third most important symptom that starts to arise during perimenopause, we can see how this is a little bit of a setup for women to struggle with their appetite during this time, right? We don't get the good hormonal ebb and flow, where we don't get those good 10 days, right? Those good days in that follicular phase. And now on top of that, we've got hormones making women not feel well, or it's really the absence of hormones making women not feel well. And that influences her willingness to move around. So women after menopause also move less, but it also influences how she feels, which then influences her cravings. So I want you to see that like the majority of the driving force there around cravings and the relationship with hormones is mostly how you feel. The way you feel is going to impact that. Now, we need some solutions, right? So we want to be solutions oriented around how we support women with this feeling so that they don't feel like it's this out of control component of their day in life. And really, like so much of the messaging that women get around their nutrition and diet is in the land of restriction, that when women have episodes of higher cravings, it really does quite a number on their psyche as far as feeling competent and able to, manage themselves. But interestingly, probably the restriction that women do in some parts of their day and life may lead them to struggling with cravings even more as a rebound impact. We see that when patients have high restriction during the, say, weekdays, right? So if we say we eat in air quotes, I eat perfectly from Monday to Thursday and then the wheels fall off the bus, it's probably that the bus was really hungry, right? And by the time we got to the weekend, we struggled with cravings. And so knowing that that's sort of the landscape that women have been looking at as far as weight management, probably for their entire lives, cravings feel shameful for those women because they feel like they should be able to exert some level of control over their food intake. And what I want to kind of do for the rest of the time together today is talk a little bit about some like more solutions-oriented concepts for managing food cravings. So the first thing that I have women do when they start to look at food cravings is to look at the structure and makeup of their actual day. So most women will report that their cravings happen later in the afternoon or towards the evening. It's really rare that women wake up first thing in the morning, stretch their arms and go, I need a chocolate chip cookie like right now. Right? That's not, I don't care how bad your PMS is, you're probably not thinking about eating a chocolate chip cookie within the first 10 minutes of being awake. It's a phenomenon that shows up later in the day, right? And so if you think back and reflect back on where those moments are, and it's probably after work, it's probably towards the later part of the day and maybe even after dinner. And what we know is that women generally will struggle with more food cravings and more struggles with their food if they don't front load their day. So front load meaning that we want a bulk of calories eaten before, say, 4 o'clock in the afternoon, that when women structure their day where they eat relatively little and then, at 3 o'clock, they really haven't eaten 2/3 of their calories for the day, which if we just do the math on breakfast, lunch, and dinner, that's kind of where things should look by 3 or 4 o'clock, that they do struggle with satiety. Like satiety is not built early enough in the day for that woman, and she catches up, right? Or she and makes an attempt to catch up. And satiety is really not something that we can just like turn on, right? It's something that literally is built throughout the day. And so I want women to take a really hard look at their day. And if, they're craving popcorn every day after dinner, but dinner was their first like legitimate meal of the day, that's not a huge surprise. And the structure of that day maybe needs to be renegotiated so that women feel more confident going into their evening hours without feeling like their emotions are really driving them. It's funny to me that like one of the most common reasons that women walk through my door for support is around fatigue. And they feel like there's something wrong with them because every day at 3 o'clock, they're exhausted. And when we go through their fueling for the day, they haven't eaten any food by that point in the day, or they've eaten like a Baby Bell cheese and their kids' toast crusts and have fatigue. So looking at that structure of the day makes a huge difference. The other thing that doing that does, and I want to talk about each individual meal, is that satiety, which is the opposite of cravings, right? So satiety is feeling like you are full and happy from the foods that you've eaten. It's not created from all food. So this is why, let's just say we did eat a chocolate chip cookie at 10 o'clock in the morning. We want another chocolate chip cookie at 11:30. Right? Or we're equally as hungry for lunch as whether we ate the cookie or not. And it's because that cookie doesn't actually have the satiety building impact that some of the other macronutrients or dietary components have. The first and sort of most important satiety builder is actually protein. And we've talked about protein intake on the show before, but women generally underfuel with this particular macronutrient, and they definitely underfuel on it throughout the day. So if you think about the way that your day is built, if you're eating with a family or eating with a partner, the vast majority of protein in a North American diet is eaten in the dinner meal, which means that women have usually underfueled with this particular macronutrient by the time they get to their 6 p.m. Eating time. And protein is really the only macronutrient that creates that level of satiety in our brain that stops food-seeking behavior. So when we look at the research on nutrition and what helps support longevity in dieting, It's actually the encouragement of patients to eat enough protein that seems to have the biggest impact on how full the patient feels by the food they're having. The second sort of dietary component that is beneficial for satiety building is fiber. And so that bulking effect that we get from fiber, and I don't mean all brand buds, right? Whenever I say fiber, women think about like sprinkling astronaut food on their cereal. And that's not what I mean. I mean fiber from mostly fruits and vegetables, although complex grains, there's nothing wrong with that. But fruits and vegetables really are the majority fiber contribution to our diet. And again, if we look at the two things that we kind of struggle to get in with regularity, it would be protein and fruits and vegetables. But these things like inherently build satiety. And so if we've struggled to fit those things in, right, at breakfast and lunch, and now it's 3:00, and not only are we tired, but our brain is like, yo, Jordan, it's time. Like, let's eat something. And that's not when we want a chicken breast, right? Our cravings at that point are not asking for necessarily the thing that we need, but we look for the bag of salt and vinegar chips, and that's going to do just fine. So you need to look at the structure of your day. So look at where all your food goes. And I'm not a particularly big fan of intermittent fasting for women. I think it creates more problems than it solves. But this example exactly is one of the reasons why that as a sole nutrition strategy for women often is not that helpful, because women who wait to eat until like 12 or 1 are never building enough satiety by 4:00. And then they end up, shoveling hummus and crackers into their mouth while they make dinner, and then often want something after dinner and then feel a lot of shame about the fact that they can't control their appetite. They probably would have just been better off if they'd eaten some oatmeal at 9 a.m. So I want you to look at your whole day. And then aside from that, looking at like the construct of each individual meal. And so it's really helpful that when you are having that kind of blackout salt and vinegar chip moment to, first of all, don't beat yourself up. But second of all, look at what the previous sort of 9 hours were that may have contributed to you landing in this place that you were struggling with cravings and appetite. So looking at your day is important. And then looking at each individual meal. Women need about 1.2 to 1.5 grams of protein per kilogram of body weight. So depending on your body weight, that may influence the amount of protein that you need. And it's based off your current weight. It's not based off a weight you wish you were. It's your current weight. And when we fuel women with that level or that appropriateness of protein, her inherent satiety and her automatic ability to navigate the rest of her day and the rest of her nutrition actually goes up. So women are more confident when she eats enough protein in her day. So those are the two things to start with. But the last and probably the most important thing to think about when it comes to looking at cravings and the impact that PMS has on cravings and perimenopause and menopause has on food cravings is that we actually just need to treat the woman, right? There was a cute study that actually looked at the success of a nutrition plan and when we prescribed it in a woman's menstrual cycle. And if we prescribed it in her luteal phase, she failed more often than if we prescribed it in her follicular phase, right? Same instructions, same piece of paper slid across the table to say, eat more veggies, eat more protein. So if you're listening to this and you're in your luteal phase, maybe just like pause it and come back to it when you're feeling a bit better. But if we give women the instructions around diet management or nutrition management in her luteal phase, she quits more often. And really that should just show us that it's the PMS and the hormonal symptoms that are the problem, not the woman, and maybe not even the diet, right? Maybe the nutrition recommendations were sound, but we offered it in a time where the woman needed different or more support in order to be able to confidently execute it. So when I talk about the impact that hormones have on appetite and cravings and weight management, I mostly want to look at how those hormones or lack of hormones are making women feel. Because if women have a sore knee and can't go for a walk, we very easily go, well, of course you can't go for a walk. You have a sore knee. Let's treat your knee, and then you can go for a walk. But when we start to talk about nutrition, we don't often look at the barriers, especially the emotional ones, that may be getting in the way of the woman being able to confidently execute the plan or even just do the things she knows she wants to do, right? She knows she wants to make a salad and not eat a bowl of popcorn for dinner. But when you have the obstacle of hormonal symptoms, it's going to decrease the likelihood that you're able to make that decision. It's going to change the way that you use food during your cycle because you're using it to support the emotional and psychological challenge of having those hormones be disrupted or be changed, which is what happens during PMS. So you have to have your hormones, you have to have your symptoms treated in order to effectively navigate cravings. And if cravings are present in your life, then doing that audit that looks at sleep and stress. And even if you're sleeping 7 hours, but your circadian rhythm is to go to bed at 1 a.m. and then wake up at 8, that still has a negative impact on your ability to navigate your food the following day. If you have PMS symptoms, if you have hot flashes, if you have changes to your mood related to your cycle, if you have changes to your mood and you're over 45 and you're maybe starting to have your cycles come closer together or farther apart, we can't ignore the impact that those things are having on your cravings. And your cravings probably won't go away if like completely if that aspect of your health is not actually addressed. And so that is maybe the third and kind of most important thing. So the first thing I said there, if we're going to recap on the 3 ways that you're going to improve your cravings this month. I mean, one is I want you to look at the structure of your day. So look at where your food goes in and are the cravings predictable, right? Like, and write it down. When is this happening to me? If it's this predictable experience or period of time, I need you to back up and look at the 6 to 10 hours that happened before that and help me understand or help you understand what those triggers are. Do you eat chocolate every time you have to talk to your mother-in-law? Right? Is there some other emotional setup? Is it when you're tired? On the day that I'm recording this podcast, I woke up at 4:00 naturally, and I ate 2 muffins before I ate my breakfast because I had such a terrible sleep that I needed to eat more food. And rather than trying to beat myself up about it, I just added 2 muffins, banana chocolate chip oatmeal muffins that I made. I just added those to my day and just kind of went, you know what? This is not a day that I can even worry about these muffins because of how poorly I slept. You need to look at those patterns for yourself because not only will it maybe help you have more compassion for yourself, which may turn into a different choice, right? If you can say, this is that time I'm hopping off the phone with my mother-in-law and now I want to pour a glass of wine or now I want to get a chocolate bar. Recognizing how you feel and that it's linked now to a food reward may help you be able to navigate those moments, perhaps in circumventing the craving part. But it also may help you prepare yourself so that doesn't happen as often. Maybe we don't call our mother-in-law 5 days a week if it always turns into a glass of wine and a chocolate bar, right? But the other piece is we want to look at, the structure of your day from a fueling perspective and the impact that though a lack of protein and a lack of fiber may be having on your hunger cues, because it's really difficult to be satisfied if those 2 nutritional components are not in your diet at the levels that they should be. But the third and most important is probably to look at those obstacles that are getting in the way of you being able to navigate your food cravings, because it's really difficult for us to help women navigate food cravings if she feels depressed, or if she's not sleeping because she has hot flashes, or if the impact of her PMS and increasing her meal size, which is what happens in our luteal phase, is actually it's an overcompensation compared to her follicular phase self, where she, eats a little less and moves around a little more. But it does really take this reflection, and I don't want to call it tracking because I don't mean to track your food, like micromanage your food, but it's more noticing what's going on with your health and having this almost like science experiment experience of looking at your cravings, where I tell my patients, hold your cravings out 6 feet in front of you and examine the situation and circumstance that they happened in and see if some of those pieces are movable, right? Don't call your mother-in-law 5 days in a row if it always turns into a glass of wine and a chocolate bar. And if some of them are immovable, then maybe those are the areas where you seek support, right? If you notice your sleep is having a big impact on your appetite, if you're noticing that your PMS is becoming this barrier that's for you to actually achieve your goals, then those are the areas to focus. And that's what I want you to talk to your practitioner about so that you can actually move forward in your health. I love that conversation around the impact that female physiology has on our experience of the world and helping women find tools and solutions to navigate their physiology and their hormones in a way that helps them achieve their health goals. To me, this is the goal of the podcast. This is what I want you to accomplish by being a listener. And so I'm appreciative of you being here. We've just opened enrollment for our 10-month women's health program at my naturopathic clinic in Burlington, Ontario. Although the program is conducted virtually and we have connected with hundreds of women all over North America through a 10-month transformational program that teaches women concepts just like we talked about today in the podcast. We teach women about their thyroid, about their digestion, about their adrenal glands, and what testing they may need to talk to their practitioner about, as well as there is an opportunity for women to learn how to support themselves in their health. We've opened enrollment for the program and are accepting women into our spring semester right now. And the link for the program is in the show notes. This is an incredibly valuable opportunity to connect with a naturopathic doctor and learn all of the things that you need to help move your health forward. But it's also done in a group format, which in my experience has just been a very powerful way of women connecting about their health. Women often feel like they're the only one that experiences the symptoms they have when they don't realize that the woman I saw before her and the woman I saw after her has the same questions about her health, has the same concerns about her hormones, and has the same or needs the same level of support and accountability to actually move the needle forward on her health. And what we've watched with our women who've moved through this program is that they lean into the accountability component and actually are able to make change because they have a group of other women around them who are equally as interested in changing their health. But they also learn a tremendous amount of information, which makes their appointments with myself or with their other practitioners so valuable and really moves that needle forward as far as them changing their health and understanding their hormones. The link to register for the program is in the show notes, and I do hope you join us. If you've missed this spring 2021 enrollment, then please get yourself on the wait list, and we will let you know when we open up for the fall of 2021. This is absolutely my most favorite way for us to deliver community support and medicine to women. And I'm so grateful that we have the opportunity to connect with each of our women in the Wild Collective. I hope you enjoyed that episode of Women's Health Unplugged. My goal is to help you feel more confident about your health. Please remember that what we talked about today in the podcast does not constitute medical advice, nor was a doctor-patient relationship formed. If you have questions about your healthcare or about how today's topic pertains to you, please take it up with your family doctor, your specialist, or someone on your health team.